Hi, welcome everybody. Welcome to the Be Healthy Summit and welcome David Lesondak. I'm so happy to have you on, David.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. David Lesondak, BCSI, KMI, FFT, LMT, is a member of the Allied Health Professional Staff in the Department of Family and Community Medicine at UPMC, a board-certified structural integrator, visceral manipulator, and fascial fitness trainer. He's located in Shadyside at the UPMC Center for Integrative Medicine and in Greentree at the Back and Neck Care Center. He's the author of the book Fascia, What It Is and Why It Matters. And I just learned that it got translated into 9 languages by now, so congratulations on that, David.
Thank you very much. Myself and the publishers are incredibly happy with the response we've been getting worldwide on this.
Yes, it is an amazing book. I also love to recommend it in my future trainings.
Mm-hmm.
So, David, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself? What is your story? Why did you dive into the world of
fascia? Because it got better results. So I started out over 25 years ago as a clinical massage therapist. So I was specifically interested in chronic pain, or even relatively, some people think chronic pain means it has to hurt all day long, all the time, as opposed to, well, it's been hurting me now for over a year to 3 years off and on. That is also a chronic condition. It's just a little more intermittent. So I had seen early on the power of body work, particularly trigger point work, among others, PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, all those chewy sounding things, to not just make people feel better, but get them better, and in a way that made the pain go away. But after some really excellent clinical training, and about 8 years of working with the toolbox that I had, there were still inconsistencies. I was and I'm sure people in the audience who follow a particular method or model, if you follow it long enough, you might begin to come up to a point where, well, it's really good for here, but once I get to there, suddenly, why are the results less consistent? And I started developing some repetitive, some strain hardening, so thickening of the tissue from repetitive motions myself. And I discovered somebody who did a version of fascial body work called Heller work, named after Joseph Heller. And I sort of had a 3-part revelation of, this is exactly what my body needs. I really need to go learn this as soon as possible. And third, I think I'm kind of doing this sometimes, but I didn't know that's what I was doing. And I better go learn about it because I need to learn more about what this is and how this works.
Mm-hmm. And what is fascia in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, fascia, not fashion. So often when I'm voice texting people and I text the word fascia, it comes out as fashion. So be very careful when you're talking to people. It is the connective tissue webbing that covers and interpenetrates every muscle, every bone, every organ, every nerve. So it is literally the stuff that holds you together. So it's extracellular, so it's outside the cellular world of your body, and yet it keeps everything connected and separate at the same time. It's a very biodynamic tissue. So for hundreds of years, it's been disregarded because of the way we study the body in anatomy class and in medical school. It kind of just gets disregarded because it covers over the interesting stuff we want to see underneath it. And its significance was overlooked. Clinically, its significance has probably been recognized since the late 1800s, and the founder of osteopathy, Dr. Andrew Taylor Still. And even in the early 1800s, it was speculated on, but it's only recently with newer methods newer imaging methods, and just a groundswell of the science of fascia that we're able to talk in scientific terms about what we've been seeing clinically for years. So that was a little more of a history lesson. So to make that a little more clearer, for those of you who are non-vegetarians, if you're making chicken and there's that kind of filmy stuff on top of the chicken that you can pull away from the chicken meat, that's fascia in its not very viable state. So if you think of a bag around each muscle, but it's connected to one big bag that has all the pockets for all the muscles in it.
And what's the difference then to the muscle?
Well, the fascial tissue has a much higher collagen content, which is what it uses to support and give your body structure. We tend to think, and we tend to be taught, that the skeleton and the bones comprise human structure. But if you look at any skeleton model you might see in a classroom, or even at a haunted house or a Halloween party like we have here in the States, they're held together by wires and screws. We don't have wires and screws in our bodies. What we have is this very, very sturdy but also elastic tissue called fascia that holds the bones in their relative position throughout the body. So it provides a casing for the muscle tissue. It also goes all the way down and coats each individual muscle fiber. So it gives us some parameters in how far we can use a muscle, how we coordinate muscle activity through the entire system. So when we're children and we throw things, we're almost always, until we learn the connectivity from the arm down the chest through across into the abdomen, not to mention the reciprocal chain of muscles along the latissimus on the posterior side of the body, we tend to throw it like that. We just throw from our hands and the ball doesn't go very far. But it's that interconnectivity, what we call force transmission throughout the body, that allows us to do much more complex movement. That's what allows us to do a very elegant dancer pose in yoga class, is that communication between the muscle and the bone, the muscle and the bone, the muscle and the bone, and the ligaments and the tendons in that complex movement. And that communication, that transmission of force, happens through the fascial network.
Thank you for making that clear. And science has also taught us that a lot of pain actually stems from our fascia. Can you please explain why that is?
Okay. Yes. So there's still some myofascial pain is still sometimes debated in some circles as to whether it's in the tissue or whether it's in the brain. That's not a debate we're going to have here today. We are going to accept that it can emanate from the tissues themselves. So this is a potentially complex mechanism. So I'm going to try to break it down as simple as possible. So here's a muscle. We have a fascial coating around it. Here's the muscle that sits on top of that muscle. It also has a fascial coating around it. And remember, yes, we're talking about two discrete muscles. We're talking about the epimysium, which is the discrete fascial coating around each muscle. But remember, within the fascial web, the fascia, it's still all one piece. Now, in between those layers, in those sliding layers, there are cells called fasciocytes. They secrete hyaluronin, sometimes referred to as hyaluronic acid. This is a lubricant that allows muscles to glide and slide on each other. Now, what is abundant in that layer between muscles are fascial mechanoreceptors, type 4 free nerve endings in particular. And these type 4 free nerve endings are responsible for transmitting signals of pressure, of pleasure, of itch, of movement, of glide. They give us much sensory information about the environment around us and about our environment inside of ourselves. Now, When muscles don't move, that hyaluronin, that lubrication fluid, gets thick and sludgy. So suddenly, instead of doing this, we're kind of doing that and not very well. So those sensory nerves that live in the fascial layers, their signals get compromised. And instead of signaling a wide range of physical sensations and sensory sensations, it's like they only know how to hit the emergency button and send out the pain signal to that area and to the neighbors around that area, as if to say, hey, there's a problem here, maybe you shouldn't do that. So, and then the less you move, the thicker it gets, the more the pain signals amplify through not moving. So it can get to be a bit of a vicious circle. Well, it hurts when I move, so I don't move. Yeah, but if you don't move, it's going to continue to hurt. It's going to continue to hurt more. That's the challenge that we have as therapists, is finding ways to encourage and empower people to begin to move, not do too much, so they can actually get better. Did that answer it fully enough?
Absolutely.
Okay. One last thing I do want to bring up. There was a study done by Helen Langevin that showed that in the case of low back pain, so those of you who look at a typical anatomy picture of the back, you'll see there's that diamond of white towards the low back near the sacrum that's known as the lumbodorsal fascia, or the thoracolumbar fascia, depending on who you read. In people with chronic low back pain, that tissue is measurably thicker, which tends to indicate greater stiffness, i.e. less mobility. So that's another important factor too, is there seems to be a thickening that can happen in the tissue itself if it doesn't move enough and it has to support something as opposed to both support and move something.
Yeah, exactly. I once did a training with Robert Schleip, and he had an ultrasound there. On different people, and you could totally see the difference there regarding the fascia.
Yeah, ultrasound has become one of the best tools to illustrate what we've instinctively known by virtue of the results we get as clinicians for decades, because you can see before, you can see after, and it's crystal clear. That must have been really cool for you.
Yeah, definitely. So what kind of movement would you recommend? Is it just any kind of movement, or is there anything which works specifically on the fascia?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, no trapeze, no hang gliding. That's a very good and big question, and I think it varies from person to person. Okay, so and the more we know about how fascia interacts with movement and how the individual in front of us interacts with pain, because I'm sure you've seen this, that there are some people who really want to work hard to get to back to where they were before the injury or before the pain, and there's people who are more afraid of it. And sometimes it's easier to pull those people back who are yay-ha, gung-ho, than it is to encourage the people who are afraid because they don't want to make it worse. So that's where you have to consider the person in front of you and the safety in general. I advocate slow, mindful movement. The science suggests, more than suggests, that proprioception, so that inherent sense of if I close my eyes, I can touch my nose with my fingers because I can feel where my body is in space. Proprioception and pain are like oil and water, they don't mix. So if you get used to not moving something, you need to be coaxed into doing it, and that has to happen slowly and carefully. So whether I've got my hand near the common extensor tendon here, and I'm getting the person to very slowly move their finger while I give it a little manual stimulation, or I send somebody who's less compromised into a chair yoga class so they can slowly, remember, how to raise their arms again without pain, slow, careful, mindful, so I can go, oh, wait, oh, that's far enough for me today, as opposed to, okay, I overdid that, I'm going to stop now. That to me is the biggest difference, is being slow and being careful. I can't emphasize that enough.
So what do you think about stretching for our fascia? What effect does that have?
Well, stretching is good if you're focusing on full body pandiculations, meaning the best way to think of a pandiculation is look at a dog or a cat. When they wake up from their nap, they don't go, oh, I'm going to stretch my pectoralis minor. No, they go, oh, I'm going to stretch that whole chain. Because you don't always know, as a person, where along, say, this whole myofascial continuity from the chest muscles into the acromion process of the shoulder, deep into the musculature and fasciolature of the arm, you don't always know where the snares and the snags are. So you really need to work that whole area, as opposed to, okay, I'm just going to very mechanically stretch this one part of it. That gets a result. I'm not convinced it gets the best result. And it certainly doesn't give you the sensory feedback of a full body pandiculation. So that's my answer to that. I've been doing yoga for over 20 years, and I probably prescribe more yoga to my patients than anything else. And try to know who the teachers are in the area and who to match the person to the right teacher, because different people respond a little bit differently to different approaches. So again, I think it's good, and I think that where the biggest opportunity is between manual therapists and movement therapists is to work together more. So if you have enough adhesions between this fascial unit, that fascial unit, and the other fascial unit, it's going to be harder for you to say, move this shoulder if everything's tight and locked down in the chest, without moving the whole back to open up and expand that shoulder. If I can go in there and do an intervention to make it easier for you to find, you're going to go to your stretching class or your yoga class or whatever else you're doing, and you're suddenly being able to do a lot more with it a lot faster. So use it or lose it is a biological reality.
Yes, for sure. And that's also exactly what we do in yin yoga. That's why I love yin yoga so much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how did you come into yin yoga? My turn to ask you a question.
I did so many teacher trainings and all kinds of styles of yoga, but it never felt complete to me. And I just looking, and I thought, where is the missing link? And then I came across yin yoga and did my first teacher training there, and that's just rocked my world, my yoga world. And I knew that I finally found what I had been looking for so long. And now it does feel complete, because I have both components in my practice, the yin and the yang energy. The yin part was missing in my practice.
That's nice. I honestly, I would like to do more and learn more yin. I kind of do a practice right now that's both a slightly more vigorous flow practice with Kundalini mixed in. But the yin component is I'd like to see more of that my own self. There aren't as many yin teachers around as I would like to see either. So I sort of feel like you guys are kind of like fascial body workers. There's some people who know a little bit, but there aren't a lot of people who really specialize in it. So that's just something I'd like to see more here in the States.
Yeah, I'm sure there is more coming. And I can also send you my book if you like.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah,
love to.
All right. What do you think happens to the fascia when we bounce on a rebounder?
Not much. So when you're on a rebounder, the springs are giving you, okay, let me take a step back. So there is a certain rebound elasticity that the fascia has. So to use that metaphor of throwing a ball, or better yet, shooting an arrow, it is what propels the arrow is that rebound from the bowstring in the bow to shoot the arrow forward. It's very similar in our fascialature as opposed to musculature. There is an energy, there is a storage of kinetic energy, and then sometimes a very explosive release in our movements from that. The best, in my opinion, one of the best fascial things you can do, and we did this all as children, is skip. Because when you're skipping, once you get the rhythm down, it's almost effortless. It also, you can't be depressed and skip. So I'm all for these. I want to start these adult skipping classes. It may look very silly, but in that skipping motion between the fascia in the glutes and in the hips themselves, there's a lot of spring and a lot of elastic recoil propulsion happening in that movement. Okay, so when you're on the rebounder and you're bouncing up and down, those springs in that fabric are imitating what is naturally a part of your body, that now your body doesn't have to do because the rebounder is doing it for you. It's fun, but it's not doing much for your fascia.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. Robert Schleip talked about some studies that did with elderly people, and they made them bounce again. They were in their 70s, I think, or even 80s, and they made them bounce again for a few seconds and a few times a week, and they could see improvements in their Achilles tendons, for example, even though they were already so old.
Yes, and in my clinic, I saw similar results with an 11-year-old who was a gymnast who was having lower leg pain because all those hard hits on the ground that they do, she lost her bounce and she lost her rocking motion through the ankle joint. And once we did that, once we restored that bounce and that springiness, the rest of her pain went away, and she's having a fabulous career in high school as a gymnast. So it can happen at any age. The other important thing here too is that the work of Carlos Stecco, beyond the spring capacity, the work of Carlos Stecco shows that the retinacula, which is the fascial thickening that's around the ankle joint itself, has 3 times the density of sensory nerves in it. So I wonder, particularly with our elderly population, what do we see elderly people do? They shuffle their feet. They don't plantar flex and dorsiflex when we walk. So I wonder how much that regulation of plantar flexion and dorsiflexion sends sensory signals to the rest of the body about the movement itself. So when I work with elderly people, one of the first things I do is work on restoring some of that elasticity and movement back in their ankles to give them a more natural gait as opposed to walking like an old person, which I don't think we have to do. So just a little clinical pearl there for your listeners.
Yeah. David, what do you think the relationship between fascia and our nervous system?
Well, we're still learning about that. The nerves themselves are coated in a fascial sheath as well as the muscles. But I think it goes back to what I said earlier about the sensory nerves that are in the sliding layers between the muscle groups. That's in, again, the sensory nerves. When we think of the nervous system, we tend to think of wires coming from the brain or the spinal cord up into the brain and down into the muscles. So, I didn't hydrate enough this morning, so my brain tells me to pick up my arm and drink that water, and that's great. But the sensory nerves, and that is a direct wired connection, but most of our nerves are not devoted to the motor control. About 43% of our nerves is devoted to sensory information, which is a lot, which is quite a lot. I want to say it's about 17 or 18% is devoted to motor control in a typical nerve. So the speculation is that if the fascia is sufficiently damaged or adheses, it impairs the sensory signals from the nerves themselves. And the sensory nerves are more like our cell phones in that I don't need a direct wire connection to pass along information. As long as that sensory nerve has the phone number of another sensory nerve of another, it can send those signals all over the body. So that is to me, the most obvious one. There is a manual method and also a movement method called nerve flossing. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
So it's just like flossing your teeth. So there's this idea that the longer nerves that the peripheral nerves branch off of can get stuck in those fascial layers, and then they don't slide so well. And then again, the signals from those nerves are impaired. So that to me is the biggest. Not to mention, on a level of neuroplasticity, and this is where the mindful component comes in. So if we go back to what I said earlier, what kind of movement, slow and mindful? Because, you know, I can be at the gym and I can be doing this and watching the TV or bopping to my music and not really paying attention to the movement or the quality of movement that my arm is making. So in regards to the nervous system and neuroplasticity, if you stop using an area of your body because it hurts to move, then the parietal lobe, where we store the information about our nervous system, information about our body physically, that area can start to just go dark a little bit. It's like the brain doesn't know how to find it, and when it does, it only knows how to generate a pain signal. So again, slow movement, coaxing is a word I like to use, which is another word for persuade. So if I have somebody who has no space between the bottom of their rib cage and the top of their hip, and I want to go in there and create more space by working on the obliques or the quadratus lumborum or any of the other associated things in there. You know, I'm not going to go in with an elbow. I could, and they would know it. But it's much better to go in with a modest amount of pressure, not enough to cause them difficulty, and try to get them to move around that area that they can't find or that's stuck, because then they have to get their brain involved, they have to get their nervous system involved, and they have to help me. I have to help them find that spot and move it, as opposed to just rubbing it till it feels better. So, and then someone like you can teach them how to move it and use it even better. So that's I don't know that answered your question per se, but that's how I approach these ideas in clinical practice. We don't have like a big, massive study that shows that what I just said is true, but certainly clinically it appears to be so by virtue of the results I consistently see.
All right, thank you.
Welcome.
What about stress? How does our fascia react to stress?
Well, it depends. So fascia responds, and this is really important for the people here listening who might be newer to this. Your fascia responds to supply and demand. And this is good, and it can also be not so good. So if I'm constantly stressed, and I'm sure you know, where do you like to put the stress in your body, Stephanie?
In my neck.
In your neck. Okay. Some people put it in their neck. Some people put it in their hips. People can put stress in all kinds of interesting and creative ways. But I'm glad you said neck, because that's easy in this. That's easy in this interview. Is people will tend to, elevate their shoulders. This is part of the startle response. So that movement to mirror it is a bit more like this. We want to protect our neck. We want to protect the vulnerable bits in front of us. And if we have a lot of stress and we don't do anything to combat the stress, over a period of months and years, the fascia will begin to support this problem. So if I work in a very stressful job and I work on a computer and it's not at the right height for me, so I have to do this to do my job, there's a lot of stress, which stresses me out too. And then I go home and I don't do any movement. I watch TV, or I play video games, or I waste time on Facebook. After 9 months to a year and a half to 2 years, this is what I look like, and I can't turn my head. And I have to do this to see what's going on around me. That's an extreme example, but I see variations on that all the time. So there's a very real mechanical aspect to how stress can impact the body physically over a longer period of time. And I just want to emphasize that to create that kind of stuck fascial change takes anywhere from 9 months to 2 years to really, if you will, cement it into the fascial system.
And what happens when our fascia gets stiff and shows crosslinks?
Stiff and shows what?
Crosslinks.
Crosslinks. Okay. Well, it doesn't move as well. So crosslinks are when fascial fibers get stuck at the wrong angles to each other, and then they don't bend so well. So what tends to happen is we will develop chronic pain conditions that don't show up on normal medical tests because they don't image for those things. And people say, well, I don't know why you have this pain. All your tests are normal. So it must be in your head. So again, that's where we need the right balance of both movement and manual therapy, in my view, to begin to change and normalize that, because it's a two-way street. So if we can, so to take it back to this example, so I could have somebody who comes in to see me who has this problem of their shoulders being here, they're superiorly shifted there, and there might be a dozen different components to this problem. Once they realize that, oh, they have some control over doing it, then they can become aware of when they're doing it throughout the day when they are under stress. Then that puts them more in control of that physical reaction to the stress response. But we have to help them find it first and make them aware of when they might be doing it and know that they have an option. Good. Did that answer all the question? I feel like I missed something.
No, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
You have a great way of explaining things to make it really simple. So I appreciate that.
It's not that, thank you. Thank you. To me, it's not that complicated.
David, is there a relationship between our fascia and our hormones?
There is, but we're still learning a lot about it. It mostly coming these days from Carla Stecco, who is an anatomy professor and MD in Italy. You should all know who she is. She's awesome. And she's found that fibroblasts, which are the cells that are responsible for building both building new collagen and eating away old collagen. So that's that two-way street idea. If the collagen buildup happens due to input, if we change the input, we can take it back in the other direction. That kind of simplifies everything I just said. Well, these fibroblasts that produce the collagen do have sex hormone receptors, and they respond to estrogen, relaxin, estradiol. And generally speaking, they tend to increase collagen type 3 when they're activated, which is the stretchier collagen, and decrease collagen type 1, which is the sturdier collagen. This is very good when you're pregnant. We need that. That has a lot to do with how the body is able to change its shape around being pregnant. It also obviously has some impact during menstruation and so on. What we do know from Carla's work is that in menopause, those receptors aren't getting as much estrogen, so the fibroblasts may be responding in a way that makes the collagen thicker and more fibrotic, which might begin to explain greater incidences of myofascial pain in postmenopausal women, which means it's even more important for you to move and stretch and occasionally get a tune-up from a skilled therapist. So that pretty much is what I feel safe to say about the relationship between collagen and fascia and hormones at this point in time. This is all really new stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, we also have Carla on, so she also talked a little bit.
Oh, okay.
All right. And do you see a connection between fascia and meridians?
I haven't studied it. I can tell you from personal experience, that my acupuncturist, who is from China and also an MD, she looks at what she does and what I do. She's like, we do the same thing. We just use different tools, but we kind of do the same thing. And I love that about her. I don't think that she's wrong. There's this idea that the fascia itself may be the conveyor of chi, if chi fits into your personal philosophy or physiology about the body. One thing I can tell you from the science, and again, this goes back to the work of Helen Langevin, is that many acupuncturists will report when they put the needle in, and it almost feels like there's a pulling action, like the body almost pulls the needle down into itself with very little effort. And what Helen was able to do, again with ultrasound, was to do real-time imaging of individual collagen fibers wrapping around that needle and doing exactly what the acupuncturists are feeling under their hands when they're performing acupuncture, which I think is incredibly cool. And I wish somebody would follow up on that and do some really groundbreaking, well, Helen broke the ground, but I'd like to see people like further that ground that she broke. As far as individual meridians themselves, I was trained and taught for a while in the anatomy trained system of myofascial meridians, Tom Myers, and he deliberately stayed away from trying to make the force transmission of the anatomy trains line up with the acupuncture meridians, because he didn't want to superimpose two models on top of each other, which I thought was a pretty good move on his part. And so I know some people have looked into it. I've just really not read enough about it to speak authoritatively. I do know, though, for example, the deep front arm line, which is pectoralis minor to the corticoid process, to the septum here in the medial part of the arm and into the extensors, is contiguous with the lung and heart meridian. Which I find is biomechanically interesting, because if you sit in a slump posture long enough, your fascia is going to support that, and then it becomes much harder to stretch this way, which could have an impact on your heart and lung meridian. Just saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah. And when you have already tried acupuncture, have you also tried cupping?
I have. I had a very bad bronchial infection about 2 years ago, and I had cupping done on my back for that.
And what do you think happens to the fascia when we use cupping as a tool?
That's a good question. Again, I don't know for sure. I can only speculate. And my thought is, we know that, I spend most of the time talking about the fascial layer specifically around the muscles. That's more in the realm of the deep fascia. There is the superficial fascia, and by superficial, we just mean closer to the skin. So you have your skin, and then you have your deep fascial layer, the covering around the muscles and such. But in between, there's this loose, almost like seaweed level of superficial fascia. Your fat cells are in that superficial layer. So is the lymph. And what science has recently called the interstitium, which we're saying has analogies to the superficial fascia, which seems to have a lot to do with immune function and intercellular communication and transport. So it may be that the cupping is loosening that layer between the deep fascia and the bottom layer of skin, and breaking up in some way, making that superficial fascia more pliable, so that the cellular messengers and so the immune function and so the lymphatic system can do its job better. That's my speculation.
Yeah, and I love it. I love to do it myself, even couple times a week. You can also do it yourself. You don't necessarily need to do it with a therapist. If you do like,
I have often wanted to get like a home cupping thing.
Yeah.
It's things for myself. So when we're done with this, you're going to have to tell me where to get the best one.
All right.
I trust you. I trust you.
You also mentioned immune function. So do you think toxins get stored in our fascia?
Oh, I don't know that I'm ready to say that per se. I do think that thickenings in the fascia, disorganization in the fascia. So when you talked about cross-linking, where fibers stick together that shouldn't stick together, I think that can impair nervous system signal transmission. It can certainly impair circulatory transmission. So if you think of your fascia as a highway, and suddenly it gets a 3-lane highway gets closed from 3 lanes to 2 lanes to 1 lane, all that traffic still has to go through it, but it has to go much slower. So in that respect, I think it slows down, therefore impairs the immune function. Does that mean that toxins get stuck in it per se? I'm not willing to go on record and say yes, it does, but it certainly slows down the transportation of the body's self-regulating mechanisms, including immune function, when there are problems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Helen Langevin also made some studies about fascia and cancer. Can you relate to that, please?
I wondered if you were going to ask that one next. Well, here's what we know about it. It's still a little controversial. So what we're finding is that the cancer cells are drawn to areas that are dense and dried out and thick. They're drawn to areas in the extracellular matrix that are less less hospitable to normal function. Furthermore, the tumors will actually create a microenvironment that exacerbates that. So if you think of your extracellular matrix and you think of the superficial level as being more like a very abundant, the word that keeps coming to mind is oasis, but that's not quite right. A very fertile and abundant area full of cellular life and communication and transport. It's like these cancer cells are attracted to the places that are the desert within this, and actually can create it and make it more like a desert. So then they can proliferate. So the controversy is that, so what do we do about that? So obviously, if we get in there with manual methods and rollers or whatever else we do to kind of juicify, to use a sciencey YNC term, to juicify that area, to try to get those areas that are stuck and dried out and hospitable more fluid and moving, then it's suddenly a less habitable environment for the cancer cells. They're not going to hang out there. And that's good. But on the other hand, they might move somewhere else and put up shop somewhere else. So the controversy is like, well, okay, if this manual therapy here is maybe loosening these cancer cells, they might migrate somewhere else and go somewhere else. And it really, I've heard both pro and con about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. And I think, again, it probably depends on the circumstance. I've treated people with pancreatic cancer just for pain. There's nothing that I can do to change that. But for pain, that's quite good, just in terms of making them more comfortable. I've treated people post breast cancer for scar tissue and other things. Really lovely, and really have helped restore function once they've been cleared that they're cancer free at that point. So the research is still out exactly on what the best way of dealing with cancer on a fascial level is. And to me, it's more about the individual and what their goals are and what their reasonings are, and coordinating with the other people as part of their cancer care. If the person is stage 4, pain relief, great. In terms of trying to do anything more than that, I don't know that might actually help speed things up rather than slow them down. Really hard to say.
Yes, and
Yeah, it's something we need to talk about, but it's still. I'm really looking forward. Tom Finley and Susan Shockett are preparing a chapter for my next book, specifically addressing this topic. So I'm in the fortunate situation of very soon being able to learn more about it my own self.
Yeah, lymph is also very important. In that case, right? You were also at the World Fascia Congress in Berlin last year, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I don't remember her name now, but she was assigned.
Melody Schwartz.
Sorry?
Melody Schwartz.
Yes, exactly. And she said, make lymph your friend and not your enemy.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was such an amazing sentence. And
yes, no, she's absolutely right. And the lymph the lymph has a relationship with my pet favorite cell, which was in chapter 5 of my book. The glial system of the brain has a connection and a direct tie-in to the lymphatic system. So there's something else really powerful going on there. Melody was part of the controversy in Berlin about whether we should treat or not treat. Based on these ideas. I was disappointed that she did not allow her conversation to be recorded and put in the videos available to watch from the conference, because that was one that I did not take very good notes on, because I thought, well, okay, I'll just watch the video again. So lesson to you folks at conferences, always take notes, because maybe the video won't be available. But yeah, what do you remember from that besides make lymph your friend? What else did you take away from her talk?
Well, she was talking about doctors removing lymph nodes, and she said that she wasn't sure this was really making sense, and to rather focus on get the whole lymph system flowing again to get the toxins out of your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's still so typically done. And what happens, particularly in breast cancer, they take all the lymph nodes out under the arm, and then your immune function is repaired. So yeah, I think it's it's again, it's something that isn't working right, so let's just cut it out. And that's not always the best answer, particularly if you're in a situation where it's not critical to your survival. And I think that's always the key. If it's we need to get this out or you're going to die in 2 weeks, maybe you need to look at that. If it's, wow, this is really bad and could get worse, but we're looking over 2 years, then you can explore less drastic options.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also remember when she said, when I go to massage, I always get told, please drink a lot of water after massage. And she said,
yes,
actually, to drink it before and also after.
Yes, absolutely. No, that was my biggest takeaway too, is hydrate before you come in, not afterwards, because then you have something to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
Bravo. Thank you for reminding us all about that. That is so important.
That was awesome.
So drink before your yoga class, and if you have to pee in the middle of it, just do it. Right?
David, you were mentioning foam rollers and fascia balls get our fascia juicy again, but what exactly happens there when we use these tools?
Well, and again, this is another area that we are still trying to come to consensus about and have a clearer understanding. And I'm very, very happy to say I've been working a lot with Jill Miller these days to understand it better myself. And she is also making a wonderful contribution to my next book, which is currently in the editing phase. And, is what we're doing with foam rollers and balls myofascial release? Maybe not. But one thing we're definitely doing, if we go slowly enough, is that we are allowing those areas that may have become thickened or dried out the opportunity to use one of Robert Schleip's metaphors, squeezed like a sponge, so that when that sponge later expands, it can draw in more fresher intracellular water, thereby actually be better hydrated and healthier for us. But again, that's a very slow rolling. And what I tend to see is people roll way too fast. And that's great to stimulate the nerves and to kind of stimulate proprioception, just like when your leg goes to sleep, you kind of, whack it a little bit to get those nerves firing again. Rapid rolling before a sporting event is very good, but to give it more the effect that you're talking about, we want to work very, very slowly, and the density of the balls matter. So, I see this GIF all the time of somebody on a roller saying, if you're not in pain, you're not doing it right. And I just want to go, wrong. Okay, so ideally, the ball or the roller that you're using should comfortably conform to the area that you're rolling, and you shouldn't have to be, if you're making that face, just think about making that face for the rest of your life. It's not helping. It's actually putting more tension into your system. You have to be able to relax into it or have it relax into you. And that also can vary from point to point on your body. There may be places, like I tell people, never use a golf ball on your feet. Golf balls have no mercy. Golf balls have no compassion. Find something that you're going to be able to conform around your foot, around that too. And that's going to vary from point to point. Obviously, if you're working on your IT band, which by the way was not meant to be lengthened, so let's just get rid of that idea right away. You're going to have to use something that's the right amount of density without being too hard, because it's also a very sensitive area in a different way than the bottom of the foot is in a different way than if you're using actually a ball on your abdomen. You're going to want something a little squishier, not something that's going to be hard and pokey. And different people respond differently. Some people are much more sensitive to those changes in pressure than other people. So they might prefer a ball with little knobbles and spikies on it, whereas other people might find that too much. You really kind of have to experiment and find out what works best for you.
Yeah, exactly. And we also have Jill on the summit, so she also talks a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's really into that, which I love about her. She's really, she knows her stuff.
Yeah. David, do you think emotions and trauma get stuck in our fascia? Could we say that?
Again, so like toxins, right? I think the behaviors around those emotions can affect our physiology and physiognomy. And certainly I have seen anecdotally in my clinic office, emotional responses happen to physical events. And it's usually around sadness. It's usually around anger. It's also can be around anxiety. I have also seen these things happen in deep breathing practices, whether it's Qigong or Max Strom's Breathe to Live program. So that is a physiological reality that we're still learning, that we're still trying to understand. I always go back to one of Tom Meyer's favorite examples, which is the depressed posture, which tends to have a sunken chest. This is the posture of grief, and sometimes that's very appropriate. Sometimes we should be grieving, and that's what's appropriate to that. It's when it's 2 years later and we still look like that and we're depressed. Trying to open that up physically by releasing some of the fascia responsible for holding us in this shape can involve an expression of emotions when you change the physicality. And it doesn't always have to happen on the table or in the class, although it can. I once had one patient tell me that the 12 sessions she had with me was some of the best psychotherapy ever. She never let on. I mean, nothing ever happened in the room or on the table. So I caution practitioners to think that, if they don't get an emotional release when they think there should be one, well, maybe it happened. It just didn't happen when you were there, and that's okay. And this is a very, very strong part of this notorious mind-body connection that we talk about, and we talk a lot about in integrative medicine as being mind-body medicine. And I do think that the fascia, as the one tissue or organ that connects every muscle, bone, organ, and nerve, certainly has the potential to be the conveyor of this mind-body connection. And we certainly see that express itself when things go awry, when people are locked in chronic fight, flight, or freeze modalities. And we see that in Bessel van der Kolk's work and in Peter Levine's work. And I would love to see some kind of studies being done that are really focused on the posture of suppressed emotions and the fasciature of suppressed emotions, not just the talk therapy around how we get better at dealing with these things. And I love it, absolutely love it, when somebody's referred to me by a psychologist, because I think, well, okay, maybe if we get this person less stuck in their body, it will free up more about what's going on with their emotions and in their way of dealing with the emotions to make it healthier. Does that mean the memory themselves is actually, somehow transcribed into that aspect of the fascial tissue itself? I don't know. There are certainly people who speculate that that's the case, but I haven't found for me conclusive evidence that it's the case. But it's a question that I really like to think about, and I like to read about as much as possible my own self.
Yeah, I once heard Robert Schleif lecture about scar tissue. When you treat scar tissue, that memories can come up again. For example, if somebody was involved in a car accident and got unconscious and doesn't even remember the accident, and then maybe he got injured and has scar tissue, and when you treat the scar tissue, that they can suddenly, for example, smell the burnt tires again.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And we know that memory is, I believe, one of the most important provoker of memories. But yet, on the other side of that, we can also treat somebody with scar tissue from another circumstance who never has that reaction at all, because maybe they don't have that same sense of trauma around that scar. Maybe within themselves it's resolved. So it's when it doesn't resolve in some way. So yeah, I've seen things like that too. So there's definitely a relationship between trauma and fascia and emotions. Absolutely. The exact nature of it, I'm still not quite ready to say.
All right. David, you also work a lot on the visceral level with your patients. How would you, or what would you recommend to a patient who has a hernia, for example, an umbilical hernia or a hiatal hernia, and they don't want to do surgery? Is there any way around it?
Mm-hmm. Well, when you're dealing with hernias, you're dealing not just with the visceral level, but with the musculoskeletal level as well. With the simple hiatal hernia, manual methods can be quite effective. So if you can, again, so in that case, the esophagus is kind of coming up through the diaphragm here at the top. If you can persuade through the stomach to kind of, oh yeah, here I am, like here, that you can ease that down, and through the hiatus, that can be very, very effective. Larger abdominal hernias that are going through the muscle wall or the retinacula there, I don't think those respond as, I don't think that that's a good idea to use manual methods for those kinds of things. But for a hiatal hernia, I think it can be very, very appropriate. Where I spend the most amount of time with visceral manipulation is more regulation of digestion and elimination, and in particularly small bowel obstructions, to keep people away from surgery. In some cases, people have had surgery for small bowel obstructions, and they don't want them to have. They're basically, you can't have any more surgeries. So why don't you go see this guy over here? And I found that to be quite effective for those circumstances.
And what do you think about cellulite? Is there a relationship between fascia and cellulite?
On the level of the superficial fascia, there probably is, but honestly, I've not spent a lot of time studying it or looking into it, so I don't have an answer for you on that.
Okay, what do you think is important concerning our fascia on the path to healing and self-healing?
Mm. That would have been a good first question. Repeat that one more time.
What is important concerning the fascia on the path to healing and self-healing?
Okay, so
I want to activate my self-healing capacities. What do I have to do on the fascial level to help myself there?
Okay, yeah, because that's healing is a big category. Again, I to simplify it, to me, when you feel like you're stuck, that's indicative of something that you need to do to fix your fascia in that area. The nice thing about going to a therapist who specializes in fascia, who's been properly trained, is they're going to take a global approach because they're going to understand that it's all connected, which it is, but they also understand how it's all connected. So they're going to draw conclusions that fit your facts that you might not do yourself with self-care. Okay, so for example, you may have a simple pathology that hasn't been stuck for very long, couple of months. So that's a good time to break out the tools to do your self-care. If it's something that's been going on for 9 months to a year to 2 years, there's going to be a lot of other contributing factors to that problem. So let's just say you're doing self-care and you're getting good results, but it keeps coming back every couple of weeks or every couple of months. Like, well, I keep going to the chiropractor and getting the same adjustment every week. It's probably something else that's causing that problem that is temporarily relieving, but let's get to the underlying cause. Okay. We're still, the exciting thing to me, and I'm going to plug my next book here, which is called Fascia Function and Medical Application, that's being published next year by CRC Press. It's a textbook for the medical community on fascia and dysfunction and healing. Is that I really think that in many, many, many orthopedic situations, many, many physical therapy situations, and many, many surgical situations, that some regular degree of fascia care or fascia therapy should be a recognized and regular integral part of it. Okay. And that's where I'd really like to see things go in the future. The golden ticket here for me, though, is that understanding your fascial system, having experience with your fascial system, with a good guide, somebody like you, Stefanie, a therapist like myself, is it allows you to become best friends with your body on a level that stays with you for the rest of your life. You begin to become more curious about the way your body feels when it does certain things, both good and bad. You begin to trust your instincts enough to know when you need help, as opposed to, oh, I can't pay attention to that right now. It's probably nothing. And, sometimes, yeah, a minor ache or pain is that, but a chronic one isn't. And we're so good at rationalizing that. So, understanding what it is to be in this body, to live in this body, to feel this body, should be the foundation of our physical education in school, not just when we're our age trying to sort out all the things that don't make sense to us. So that's kind of a big perspective question, but that was kind of a big perspective answer, but that was kind of a large field question, I thought, from you. So that's my answer.
All right.
I hope that was the question you were asking.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
David, would you mind sharing with us what your own healthcare routine looks like? What do you do for your own healthcare?
Okay. 2 yoga classes a week, 90 minutes each, as much as possible. There's some weeks I don't get that in, and I mean actually physically going to a class, because that's, doing it at home is great, but being in an environment where that's all you can really focus on. And I like twice a week because I usually find that by midweek, I need to blow off steam and tension. And then the one I take on the weekend is more for exploration. Okay. And that's often how it works for me. So that's paramount in my conditioning. I just started going back to the gym again. because I'm hitting 55 and I just need a little more regular cardiovascular routine. I would love it if I loved running. I don't. And I have tried, but I do enjoy a good elliptical machine, particularly with the hand holds, because I think that's really important for the cross crawl pattern and gait. And trying to do that for 15 to 20 minutes 3 times a week makes me a much healthier person. I try to pay attention to where my food comes from and also how I feel after I eat. And I recently used a company to test my gut microbiome and get a complete report on what I have too much of, just right enough of, and not enough of, and how that relates to different food and substances I might ingest and how I might need to alternate that. So I think that that's really important too. And as much as possible when I work, I try to be biomechanically responsible. So I really try to be in my body as a therapist, because people think, boy, this really must beat up your hands. But it's like, you know what? If I'm working on somebody and I'm in a strong lunge position, then I can leverage aspects of my whole body to deliver the work through my hands. So it's not just pressure coming this way, which is why I've been able to enjoy a career that by 2022 will be 30 years now. So that's kind of a snapshot of all of it. And as you can see, I'm really staying hydrated this morning because I'm just extra thirsty this morning. So when you're thirsty, drink water. That's why we have thirst.
Yeah, exactly. So David, are there any new findings in the research for fascia?
Well, I kind of covered the bit of the things on hormones. I kind of collect research like baseball cards. So it's like, oh, this, oh, that. And then I'll like take a weekend and just kind of sit down and try to absorb it all, print it out. I've been so busy working on book number 2 that my brain is so there right now that there's nothing really exciting that has really rocked my world at this point. I see lots of confirmations of things in consensus statements like the one from the British Sports Medicine Association on fascia, and that was a really nice piece of writing, saying a lot of the things that we already know or that are really in my book, in my first book. But this next book is got contributions from Carla, from Jill, from Antonio, from Robert, all of the heavy duty people, written specifically towards the medical PT and healthcare profession. And that's really where my brain and my focus has been on. So in making sure that all those T's are crossed and I's are dotted and such. So if we do a follow-up, I want to say probably in February, I might have a few more nuggets for you. Okay. But right now it's like this 24 separate chapters, and it's like this, my head's only this big, but it feels like it's out here right now.
When is it coming out, the new book?
We hope somewhere July through September. The production cycle is 6 to 9 months, and it really depends on the publisher. And they wanted everything by next Friday. And I said, really? Because you're not going to look at it before Christmas. And there's always those few people that need a little extra time. So we're going to have that into them by the middle of January. So we're hoping by midsummer to early fall, somewhere in that July to September corridor.
Yeah, exciting. I'm definitely going to get that as well.
I'll let you know, Stephanie. I'll let you know.
I hope so. Thank you. David, is there anything else you want to share with us?
No, I think that was really thorough and comprehensive, including asking me what I do. And the other important thing I just want to add to that is, again, awareness. It's like, we're busy, we're talking, we're gonna, you're gonna move around. You're not gonna be sitting in perfect posture all the time. And that's fine. We should move around. But if I'm sitting like this too long, I need to go, oh, wait a minute. Okay, that's better. So once you can move it, the key is awareness. The key is just throughout the day, check in with yourself. Where's my shoulder? Oh, did you see that? Did that show up on the camera? So yeah, I have a tendency, it's a stress response in me. It's a hunger response. I also play guitar. So there's a tendency for this shoulder to always be more elevated than this shoulder. So checking in with yourself. And okay, where am I at? Where are my feet? Where know your places. I have a patient who comes in for regular maintenance. She's in the high performance athletics category, and she talks about her forever spots, which are just the places that tend to accumulate more musculoskeletal fascial tension because of her high performance and her athletics. Know your forever spots and just check in with them occasionally, and modify appropriately. If I'm working on somebody and my hands start to hurt, then I go, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing? Where's my posture? Oh, I'm human, as susceptible as anybody else. So just awareness. That's my last word.
Yeah, that's such great advice. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking. Thanks for inviting me. It was a blast.
Absolutely. I totally enjoyed it. It was awesome talking to you. David, where can people find you?
In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the United States. You can go to davidlesondak.com. We'll put that in the show notes. You also can go to fasciamatters.health, HEALTH. So it's not .com, it's .health. And I'm currently in the process of upgrading these websites. I've got kind of a world tour going on next year. I'm going to be in Arizona, Lisbon, Seoul, Korea, France, Australia, Florida. So I do get around, and I'm hoping to get around even more, because I love teaching the manual methods that I employ, and in teaching them is simply, as you say, I explained the science part of it. It doesn't have to be complicated. So that's the best place to find me. And the book, of course, is available worldwide on Amazon and through Handspring Publishing. And if any of you out there listening in Germany land know any publishers, bug them. Say, we want this book in German, okay? It can only help.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. I'll keep my fingers crossed.
I agree. I don't understand with Robert Schleip and his books why mine isn't available in German too. Not that he has anything to do with that personally, but I thought that would be one of the first. So,
David, thank you so very much for sharing your time and your wisdom with us. It is so very appreciated.
You're so welcome. I'm hope it was helpful. And I'll be sure that you've got my email address there. So if anybody listening has a specific question or a follow-up, drop me a line. If it's urgent, let me know. If not, it may take a week or two, but I will answer.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much, David.
You're
many
welcome.
blessings to you, many blessings to everyone watching, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.